Today's episode of the podcast is titled How to Stay Optimistic When Life Starts Punching You in the Face. I was on a morning walk the other day thinking about what I wanted to talk about for this week's episode. And I couldn't help but just have this thought back to when I was such a negative person, such a pessimistic person, and I felt like the world was against me. And it was in those moments that I look back now, or it's in the moments now when I look back, that anytime I'm having these negative thoughts, I'm letting my emotions get the best of me. So something bad happens to me and I immediately just think all these negative thoughts and I want to lash out and I want to complain and I want to mope about it and I want to just play that victim mentality. It's in those moments where I look back and see that every time that I gave energy to that, every time I fed into that, the more negativity came back to me. I'll take you guys back to an example. So I graduated college in December of 2021. And at that point, I was kind of riding my high horse. It was the first time I'd ever got a 4.0 GPA in college. Granted, I wasn't taking many classes, but still, I learned how to work hard. I did really well. I had a great season, great senior year of football. I was a captain, and overall, just a great semester, a great way to end college. Then I went out on my own. I started my own business doing personal training and nutrition coaching, and my business was called Game Shape for Life. That was what and basically the premise of that was like former athletes trying to get back in shape. I was I was like a month out of college, and you know, who's the person that you can help? It's like the person that you were, previously. And so there was a previous version of me where I thought I wasn't going to play football anymore, and I needed help physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, just getting back on track. So Game Shape for Life, that's what that was. Quick little backstory there. But I had this idea that I was going to go out into the world and I was going to be a personal trainer. I was going to be a nutrition coach. I was going to start this online business. It was going to be easy. It was going to be great. I had friends who were doing it. I saw people online doing it. They made it look so easy. I started doing it and it wasn't so easy. There was student loans to be paid as well. So after you graduate, the student loans kick back in after the whole COVID conundrum. So student loans start kicking in. My car breaks down, and my only clients that I have that were committed to work with me decide that they're going to go in a different direction. So I just graduate. I get my piece of paper, sick, but now I have no job, no money, and no car. And I just felt so much stress and anxiety. Like, where was the next dollar going to come from? Like, how was I going to pay for gas? How was I going to pay for insurance? How was I going to pay for, and my phone. My phone broke too. So now no, I got no car. I've got no money. I need a new phone. And shortly after, my laptop broke too. So it was just like everything was unraveling on me all at once. And at that time, I didn't know how to deal with those negative emotions, those negative thought patterns, and just the setbacks and difficulties that were coming to me in life. And I didn't really have any mentors. I didn't really have any people that I trusted that I could go to talk to about these things. Ultimately, I was on my own, but that's only because I made myself be alone. I thought I could do everything on my own. I didn't reach out to anybody. I didn't want to talk about it. And I just let everything bottle up inside of me. And when you let that happen, it's like a boiling pot of water, right? Like it just keeps boiling and boiling and boiling until it overflows and it just becomes a nightmare. it just becomes an absolute freaking nightmare. So, when it rains, it pours, is a saying that I like to say when it comes to this. And so I'm a big believer that the energy you put out into the world is going to get reciprocated back to you. So if you're putting out negative energy, you're going to get that negative energy back. If you're putting out positive energy, you're going to get that positive energy reciprocated back to you. There's a thing called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, also called the frequency illusion. And this is a cognitive bias that affects how we think and process information. It's a phenomenon where something you recently learned seems to appear everywhere. So if you've ever thought, man, I feel like I'm just seeing white minivans all over the place, right? Like all of a sudden you start seeing white minivans everywhere. And it's like, were there more, are there more white minivans on the streets now than there were before? No, but since you're more cognitively aware of that, you're going to inherently perceive to see more white minivans. And if we think negative thoughts and we feed into the negative emotions that stir up in us, like, do we actually think that we're going to have positivity and just good things slapped upside our heads? Like, are we going to get that promotion? We're going to get into that new relationship. We're going to just have more motivation and inspiration to work on that business project or go to the gym and crush our health and fitness goals. Like, no, of course not, right? Like, the more negative emotions that we think, the more negative energy that we put out into the world, we're going to get slapped upside the head with negative emotions, right? Like, I've been there. It's like every time I think the world is against me and I'm like, man, can I just catch a break? That's when things start to keep hitting you, right? But it's in those moments where you have these negative thoughts, these negative emotions, and we want to just lash out. We want to freaking just punch a hole in the wall, or we want to feed into our negative vices. Like we want to go eat bad food, or we want to binge watch Netflix, or whatever it may be. Like the more that we feed into that, the harder it is to break out of it. Like just like once you fall into the pattern of good habits, like it just becomes easy and you don't need a lot of motivation to do it because you just have that discipline. You've just built that muscle to do it. The same thing happens with our mind and in our thoughts. And there's a crazy stat that, according to science, 80% of our daily thoughts are negative and 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So 80% of the daily thoughts that we think are negative. And 95% of those negative patterns just keep coming over and over and over and over again. And if we don't do something about it, if we don't take control over our mind and over our emotions, what's going to happen? Obviously, we are going to fall victim to negativity. And we live with this victim mentality, right? Like I've not always been the most optimistic person. Seriously, like I haven't. I'm a very optimistic person now. I like to think so. But there are definitely days where I have my moments where I feel like it's just one thing after the next and I just can't catch a break. And when you believe you can't catch a break, I truly feel that that energy is going to be reciprocated on you versus if you stay optimistic that things are going to work out for you and that this season of darkness is ultimately going to be followed by light. The light will shine on you sooner than you thought. Much sooner than you thought. And there's three words that really come to mind when, I think about optimism and like just my life in general and like looking back on the past couple of months and even couple of years, like there's three words that I come back to that are just foundational for me. And the first one is faith. And I always come back to this Bible verse, which is Hebrews 11, verse 1, which defines what faith is in the Bible. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Hebrews 1, verse 11. No, sorry, Hebrews 11, verse 1. And like we have to have the faith that things are going to work out. We can't just rely on what we see or like what is currently there to ultimately make us feel more optimistic, have more positivity, and just be a generally happy person, right? Like having that faith that things are going to work out in the end. And for me, that's knowing that having the faith that God is going to take care of me. And there's a reason why he's putting me through these difficult challenges. There's a reason why I'm in this difficult season of life, right? Because all of those things that we're having to endure are going to strengthen us and allow us to come out better on the other side, having gone through this lesson, having learned something, and being able to apply it to our life then. So I don't know why I had this thought, but I don't know why this came to mind, but Tony Hawk, right? One of the greatest skaters to ever live, legend, first person to do a 900. It was like a huge deal back in, I think, like the 1990s. Nobody had ever done a 900 before, but he had to have that faith in himself that he could do it, that he could do the unseen. I also think of Travis Pastrana, which is, I don't know why I'm bringing up all these extreme sports athletes, but it's just what comes to mind because they're like the first to ever do things. Travis Pastrana was the first person to ever do a double backflip on a motorcycle. And I remember this distinctly, like when I was a kid, staying up super late and watching it with my dad and brother, him do this double backflip on the motorcycle, on the dirt bike. You know, I was probably like 9 or 10 years old, something like that. How do you think that they had the confidence and the courage to go out and do that? They had to have faith. Like they had never seen it done before. Nobody had ever done it, but they had to have the faith to go attempt it. And when you have that faith, it gives you the confidence to go and do it. And like, I also think about Moses, right? And Moses in the book of Exodus, in the Bible, like God was telling him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, into just freedom. And he had to have faith that even though he didn't know what the outcome was going to be, he had all his people telling him, Moses, like, why are we doing this? Why don't we just stay in Egypt where we have food and we have shelter and we have all this and we have that? Moses didn't know why God was calling them out of Egypt, but he had to have faith to trust that everything was going to work out. And then, they went out, they parted the Red Sea. God parted the Red Sea for Moses and the Israelites, and they ultimately made it into freedom and flourished. And again, there was a lot of difficulty, struggles, hardship that they faced, but ultimately they had faith and they made it through. The second word is hope. And there's 2 verses that come to mind there for me when I think about hope. And the first is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and hope. And, you might have heard it in a different version of the Bible. It's also said plans to prosper you, right? That verse is super powerful to me. Just knowing that, like, everything that happens in my life, good, bad, whatever, it's all part of God's plan. It's all leading me to where I'm supposed to be. The second is Joshua 1 verse 9. And this is what I call my life verse. So it's a verse I adopted as like the verse that I try to live by. And I have it on my home screen, my phone. I've got it hanging up on my walls. Joshua 1 verse 9 is very powerful for me. And it's been that way since I was a senior in high school, since I heard it. So Joshua 1 verse 9 is, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And when I read that, and when I say it every single day, it just gives me this overwhelming sense of peace and hope. knowing that God has commanded us to go out, be strong, be courageous, because when we have Him in our lives, we don't have to fear. Because it's like a safety net, right? Imagine you're walking across the Grand Canyon on a tightrope. It's windy, it's scary. You might fall. It's like, truthfully, you might fall. But imagine there's like a big trampoline underneath and you're just gonna hit it, bounce back up, right on that tightrope, right on that line, and keep on walking along. And so when I hear those two verses, the things that I face in life, the daily challenges, the struggles, the bad news, the negative thought patterns that I have, they all just fade away. And I just pray these verses over and over and over and over again until it really sticks in my brain. Because it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to actually believe it. Faith and hope. 2 words. Very powerful. The third word is surrender. And you might be thinking, okay, Dom, surrender? Like, what? Especially after like faith and hope. Like, these are 2 uplifting, like powerful words, right? And then you hear surrender. What is that? What does it mean to truly surrender? I like to look at life like a flowing river. And the more you resist it, the more you let it shake you, the more likely you are to keep drowning and just keep struggling, right? You're going to struggle. You're going to drown. You're ultimately not going to get to where God wants you to be. Whereas the more you surrender and you just flow, you see life is this flowing river, the quicker you're going to get to where you're supposed to be. And so the more we resist, and I think resistance is trying to do everything on our own, leaning on our own ambitions and trying to get there ourselves, it's never going to work. It's never going to work because we're never going to fully become the person that God wants us to be. We're always going to be searching for like, what do I want? What do I want? Me, I. And when we're constantly thinking about ourselves, it's a dangerous place to be because then we start to look at ourselves as the idol. We try to find our identity in what we do versus finding our identity as God's child. There's a lot more peace in that. And when I look at my day, I'm like, was I optimistic today? What were my thoughts like? What kind of patterns did I feel in like the emotions that I feel? There's a few boxes that I have written down on my whiteboard that are the things that I need to do each day in order to be more optimistic. Like I know I'm a more optimistic person. I know I'm a happier person. I know I'm a more joyful person when I do these things. And the first one is spending time reading my Bible and spending time with God each morning. That's a non-negotiable for me. Somebody asked me in one of my Q&As on Instagram the other day, is like, how do you make time for faith when there's so many other things on your plate? You make it a non-negotiable. You get up early, you find something that you can commit to and something that you can be consistent with, and you just make it a habit. If I don't start my day with that, it throws the whole rest of my day off. The second thing is doing something creative and playing offense instead of defense in my life. And what that means is like we're constantly being reactive. We wake up and first thing we do, we're checking text messages, we're checking emails, we're checking Instagram. We're doing all these things that put us on defense. For me, it's 8:06 in the morning right now. And I've been up since 5:15 and I have not checked my text messages yet. Hopefully nothing went wrong, but I woke up, I dropped my mom off at the airport. She was down here in Austin for her birthday. I came back, read the Bible, I went for a walk, talked to God, Came back, made a cup of coffee, ate breakfast, started finishing prepping for the show. And I'm putting something positive out there in the world. I'm doing versus like being on the reactive side of things. So for me, doing some sort of creative work, putting something out there into the world, creating versus consuming helps me stay out of the comparison trap and helps me stay more optimistic. The third thing is moving my body. Whether it be going for a walk in the morning, whether it's like getting some sunshine, just doing some stretches, doing something to get the blood flow moving first thing in the morning is crucial for me. And then throughout the day, whether I'm running, whether I'm lifting, if I'm doing both, if I'm, playing pickleball, if I'm playing basketball, whatever I'm doing, there has to be some sort of movement in my day. And on the days where I don't do those things, I'm wildly less optimistic, and I'm way more of a negative person than I typically am. And granted, fitness and moving my body has become something like so habitual and easy for me. I know for some people it's harder to make a habit. For me, it's a non-negotiable. It's just like something I do each and every day, even on like a rest day. Sunday, yesterday, I wake up and after I do my morning prayers and read the Bible, I get 15 minutes of movement in. Just some stretching, some mobility, some push-ups, pull-ups, air squats. Just do something to get the blood flow moving. So the three things: spending time with God each morning, doing creative work, playing offense instead of defense, moving my body. Fourth thing, proper nutrition. I notice when I have more processed sugar, or if I have pizza, or if I have some of these fun foods, too much of them, and I'm not going to be as optimistic. I'm not going to be as happy. I'm going to have more negative thoughts. It's crazy what like sugar and processed foods and oils and all this other crap can do to our brain and our neurology. It's wild. But also like planning out my nutrition throughout the day. Like, did I eat a big meal for breakfast? Like, how did I feel after that? Did I not eat breakfast and not eat until lunch? And just kind of taking a look at like my daily routine and my daily schedule of like what I'm eating, what I'm consuming at certain times of the day. I know that if I have, more carbs early in the day and then I don't utilize them, I don't go to the gym or I don't go for a run or anything like that, I tend to get more tired. And when I get more tired, I lose motivation and I'm not as creative and I'm just more sluggish. So it's like thinking about nutritional timing and what I'm putting into my body and when. That's ultimately going to dictate for me whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic, positive or negative as well. And the last thing, which I think is the most important, is spending time with positive people. If I'm spending time with negative people who are constantly complaining, who are constantly looking at the downsides of life, I am in turn going to feed into that. Like, I look back into this at points in my life and it was like, when was I the most pessimistic? When was I the most negative? When did I fall into these bad habits and patterns? It's when I was surrounding myself with people who were making me more susceptible to that. Versus when I'm spending time with good people, ambitious people, God-fearing people, people who are going to challenge me to be better, I'm a more optimistic person. And then there's also cues in my life. So, for example, it's like when I feel X, I am going to do Y. So, if I feel anxious, I am going to do 10 push-ups. Or if I have a negative thought, I'm going to say, thank you, Jesus. Having these, conditioning our brains for these cues ultimately is going to help us change from being in a state of negativity and feeding into that versus putting ourselves in a place where we're doing things that are going to help us remain more positive and get our thoughts back on track and our emotions back in line. On top of that, having things in your environment that are going to help you remain positive. So again, having Bible verses and positive quotes on my wall and on my whiteboard and as the home screen on my phone, on my computer, just constantly looking at things that are going to help you remain more positive. It might sound stupid, but like optimizing your environment for productivity and positivity is going to make you a more optimistic person. And we condition our minds with what we put into it, right? So when I'm doing things like making breakfast or doing the dishes or folding laundry or doing the things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis, like just having positive music playing or positive podcasts, just filling my mind with things that are going to make me think more positive thoughts versus constantly looking at the news or listening about all the terrible things going on in the world. The more that we fill our minds with that, the more negative we're going to be. And the more positive we can be, the more optimistic we can be, the better our quality of life is going to be. Right? Like there's statistics out there that show that people who are more optimistic end up living longer lives, higher quality lives. And we're constantly living in this world of comparison. And when we live in that world of comparison, we think we're never going to be good enough. We think, I'm never going to look like this person. I'm never going to be able to run as fast as this person. I'm never going to be able to lift as heavy as that person. I'm never going to make as much money as that person. Like it's a never-ending cycle. Because we're constantly comparing ourselves to others versus thinking about how can I just get a little bit better each day and setting those little boxes that you can check off each day that you know are going to move the needle forward. Right? Like I have on my whiteboard over there, I have like my daily health goals that I need to hit in order to move the needle forward. I need to hit my workouts, I need to hit my protein goal, I need to do my physical therapy for my knee. If I do those 3 things, I know that I might not become the athlete that I want to be right now, but if I do them every single day, I'm going to be more adaptable, I'm going to perform better, I'm going to recover better, and ultimately I know that my fitness is going to increase. If we don't have optimism, if we can't control our thoughts and we can't control our emotions, how are we going to control our destiny and our lives? So I have these Bible verses that I always come back to. I've got these words that I come back to: faith, hope, surrender. I have these triggers. I have these cues. I am not a naturally like the most optimistic person in the world. But I've developed these skills and these habits from books and podcasts and mentors and friends that help put me back on track to be a more optimistic person so that I can show up as my best, pour back into others, live a high quality life, and help you guys do the same. Guys, the quality of your life is determined first by your thoughts, right? And if you have negative emotions or thoughts, don't be hard on yourself because it's natural. But find the things that are going to allow you to snap back into it, get back on track, stay optimistic, and when life punches you in the face, know that those things are happening for you and not to you. And it's all about how you navigate them and that you go and leverage them for your benefit. I hope you guys found this episode useful. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. It helps the show grow so that we can reach and impact more people. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star rating and review. I really appreciate it. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.